And it looks like we are live. All right, so hey everyone, so we're back at it again. Took a couple of days off last week simply because of, I wanted to focus more on topics dealing with the death of Mr. George Floyd and the situation that's going on in America big time. It's something that I think a lot of us need to really have a means of communication, open dialogue. It's absolutely necessary because, unfortunately, because things have gone on for so long and we've kind of fallen into the comfort of our corner without really addressing the means of why is it that people are protesting? Why is it that people are angry? Why is it that, it seems like this murder was really the straw that broke the camel's back. And so today's discussion, working today, is really, we're really focusing and talking about communication and the way how to communicate and the way how to talk and the way how to cross that bridge with someone that you may not be traditionally comfortable talking with. So that you enjoyed today's discussion. I'm doing a little bit of an extra long intro, so I apologize, but I hope you enjoyed today's discussion, and here we go. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Major Chevy. Chaveso is what they call him. So, how you doing? How you doing?
I'm doing as good as it can be, given the circumstances, both the COVID circumstances and our most recent stuff going on racially across the states. So, but my family's good. I got little kids, so I don't have time to have bad days.
Yeah.
So I'm good. Thanks.
You're in the same boat as me. I've got an 11-year-old and I've got a 6-year-old. I've got two little black boys who are rambunctious, full of energy. As a black dad, you can't help but think, man, they're growing up and they're going to eventually not be judged as little kids. Especially they're big for their ages too, and it's something that's it's kind of depressing, but it's kind of it has the potential for me to be a teacher and to embody, push good qualities and morals onto my boys. So it's something that, something that I thought about. Unfortunately, I had to think about it.
I thought about it too, man. I got two little girls, and as we were talking, because we try to shape the narrative about what's going on at the table, right? So we're having breakfast last weekend, and I decided to bring it up to my 10-year-old. She's almost 11. She's real conscious, really mature. And there was as we talked through some things, there were some tears in her eyes, and she said that she was afraid for me. And I'm like her superhero or whatever. And I'm not a big guy or anything like that, but she looks at me like a superhero. So to see that was particularly touching. But we're working through it because that's what we do.
Yeah. So I should not have looked up the background of who Mr. George was. Stature-wise, we're the same size, same person, same looks. My wife thinks every day, as I'm leaving every day, she's concerned and worried for me because out there, the system isn't really built for me. It wasn't built for me traditionally. It's not built for me right now. And especially with the very sensitive nature of what's going on, it's a scary situation that we're in right now. But I see it as a situation where there's potential for, obviously a lot of planes have been not literally, but figuratively burned down, right? And now we have the opportunity for men of color, women of color, to actually have an opportunity to have their voices heard very well. And having their voices being heard very well is supremely important in my opinion. And that's the reason, one of the big reasons why we have you today to really come and talk to us about how to have our voice out there. Did you like that transition, by the way? Wasn't that good?
Super good. I mean, like it flowed very well. I saw the connection coming. You laid it down pretty good.
Hey,
And I think, you know, some of the stuff we'll talk about tonight will help. I'm here to bring whatever expertise, whatever experiences I have to the fold to help a couple of people have these conversations. Because like yourself, I've been having them all week with all kinds of people from all walks of life. And what I realized as I've talked, the message has been honed a certain way. There's been certain things I've been picking up on that I've been receiving, but also some things I keep going back to. I want to help some people through with some tips and tricks tonight, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. So, Mr. Cook, Brother Cook, Major Cook, however you want me to call you, tell me a little bit about yourself, man. I mean, we see you with the military background stuff going on there. We see you with, you know, the cool name Chevy. Who is Chevy Cook? Who are you?
So I will probably say first, I'm a father. I've already mentioned that. Those are my two greatest accomplishments of my two kids. I have London, who's working on 11. She was born on the 4th of July. And then I have Lola, who is 18 months, who was a surprise, who was born on Thanksgiving. So apparently I only have kids once a decade, and they're only on national holidays. So I will start there, fatherhood, holiday babies. Easy to remember. I'm a father because I'm with my wife. Have been with her for a while. We've been married 14 years, but together for about 22. High school sweethearts. Ashley and I are both from Columbia, South Carolina, and we've known each other since we were young teenagers, right? And so that's where the story of me really kind of begins as an adult, is between my kids and my wife. Lastly, I'm obviously an Army officer, so 17 years in as of this month, about a dozen of those in the special operations community, and psychological operations specifically, just to like tell it. And beyond that, you know, I'm a doctoral student right now, so I'm not necessarily doing the Army thing, but the Army is funding it, and I'm appreciative of it. And like you said, I get the chance to also be a leader in the nonprofit community. Have my own thing called Military Mentors that's been around for about 5 years now.
Military Mentors, what are they all about? What's Military Mentors about? So we focus on both leader development and leadership development. So leader development being your individual knowledge, skills, and abilities. Leadership development being a little bit broader, thinking about how to put those individual knowledge, skills, and abilities into a socio-emotional capacity, because if you're not being followed, you're not a leader. And we also try to stretch the conversation around mentorship. It's all about mentorship and differentiating teaching, coaching, mentorship, sponsorship, and focusing on the military mostly, but also for beyond. So bringing these, the capabilities we've learned about in the military, about mentoring, about developing, about developmental opportunities, training, and taking that out into the civilian sector so they can learn how to do some of this, not necessarily do the stuff that we do, but learn our best practices for building elite capacity, high stress leaders. So that's what we do. We educate, facilitate mentorship for a lot of folks. You know, it's ironic. Exactly what you talked about is kind of my vision that I had for this channel, like the best lessons learned that we have as military leaders, and whoever is viewing it and whoever is taking notes or whoever is really following and understanding it, those are the lessons that they'll take. So maybe I need to hit up you for a job or something. Who knows, man?
No, hey, if anybody wants to pay me, I appreciate it. I appreciate what I get from the government, obviously, but I'm always looking for opportunity. So I appreciate the fact that you would want to, in all seriousness, that you would want to connect with us. And anybody out there that wants to connect with us, you can find us on a wide variety of mediums. So we're just trying to make a dent in the universe, trying to make a good dent.
Okay, good. So I know you sent me a few slides, and these slides, I think, people will really appreciate that they're really short to check out. They're really kind of hitting to the point. And so I'm going to try something new today where you and I, we're not going to be on the page itself. We're just going to have the slides and your voice. Obviously, when people send questions or comments, we're going to read them and we're going to have breaks in between. So I just want to have you just take the lead and let me know when you're ready to go, and we'll run with it.
I'm ready. So as soon as you get rid of this ugly mug so people can focus on what we got here, I'm good to go.
All right. So let's jump into the first one.
Okay.
So here we go. Bang. And here we go. So first one. Go ahead, man.
Thanks for sharing these. There's your title. I like to start with a little bit of a thought experiment, if you will. So let's just walk on a journey real quick. A viral pandemic affecting the entire globe cripples your organization as sickness, new schedules, layoffs, grind work to a halt. Not only that, but viral protests and riots enrage our streets across the nation after yet another senseless, extrajudicial, race-associated killing reminds us of years of oppression and violence. In each of these situations, ranging from health catastrophe to a loss of our humanity, one's ability to get through it all must be forged well before the chaos is at hand. I heard it best through something I read from a leader during Hurricane Katrina, when they say you cannot change yourself in 30 minutes into something you have not been for 30 years. So as we go through this conversation tonight about bridging difference, and about connecting when it seems like we're most disconnected, this is a conversation about being a professional. This is a conversation about being a leader. This is a conversation about being a connector. And I have a couple of experiences that I would like to show and share that'll help you get through it. Okay. With that being said, next slide, please. So you've heard a little bit about my Army time and my SOF experience. I also taught at West Point for a little bit. That's some of my past that I bring to this as I situate myself in this conversation. And I also talked a little bit about how I'm a student, I'm a PhD student at Tufts University, where I study human development, specifically character development. So I want to talk a little bit deeper about why I think I can have a conversation about this particular topic tonight. All right, you see the Military Mentors logo on there, but you also see something called Promote. So Promote was a nonprofit I was a part of that focused specifically on diversity, inclusion, and equity. And I was the director of learning and development. So it's not just my military experience or military mentors experience. I've been in different nonprofits. You might see a photo up there top right of me standing to then acting Secretary of the Army, Robert Spear, a couple years ago. So the Secretary of the Army gives out this award for diversity and leadership. And I know this is a bit of a humble brag, but I want to frame this discussion. I can't just have this discussion because I'm a Black man. I think I can have this discussion because the Secretary of the Army said I might know a little bit about diversity and leadership and gave me this award a couple of years ago in the most awkward moment possible as I stood on stage in the Pentagon and he read this litany of a bio and this write-up that my leadership gave me. So that also uniquely positions me to talk about this conversation. But most importantly is that weird funky flag that's to the bottom right. So if you're not familiar with what that is, it kind of looks like the American flag, but it's got the Union Jack in the top left. That's the flag of the East India Company. So I'm a mixed race heritage individual like many people in America. And I can trace the white side of my family back to 1515, back to England, to Sir Maurice Abbott, who was an English merchant, was one of the first governors of the East India Company, that's this flag. It comes from the East India Company. If you know your history, the East India Company helped establish the 13 colonies. He left England and helped, Sir Maurice Abbott comes over to the States and helped establish Jamestown in the Virginia colony. That's why my daughter's name is London, being born on the 4th of July. I wanted to honor his legacy.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So when you want, if I can really like get down to the detail, I am as American as they come. My history, my lineage helped start this country from that side. Now I can only trace my black side back to about the 1800s when we started showing up on censuses. And we all know where we all come from, okay?
Yeah.
So I think I'm uniquely positioned to have this conversation because of my history, and my daughter knows this history about her name. As we talk through this, we're going to talk about 4 eyes, so we can be clear-eyed tonight. Those 4 eyes, not glasses, we're going to talk about the issue. We're going to talk about some influence. We're going to talk about IEDs to avoid, and then we're going to talk about ideas. Please hit the next slide.
Got you.
So we know what the issue is. Everybody's watching the news, okay? Let me make sure we know specifically who we're talking about. We're talking about George Floyd, obviously, but we're also talking about Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Sean Bell, Freddie Gray, Philando Castile, Stephon Clark, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, right? And if you really want to go back, we can go back all the way to Emmett Till and everything, but I won't do that because I wasn't alive during that time. We can just go to Amadou Diallo when I was at the prep school before West Point in 1999. And that issue really hit close home to me because the last time I saw something like that was Rodney King. Something similar, right? Different context and everything, even different sides of the coast. But I remember Amadou Diallo, and I still think of that individual when things like George Floyd happen. So that's the issue. That's where we're at. And we're going to talk about it a little bit. So let's go a slide forward. Since most of you on this call are watching, most of the people who interact with military mentors are military professionals, let's start with a statistic that we all know. Less than 1% of us serve in the military, in a very diverse military, a military that has been on the forefront for many years of diversity and inclusion and equity issues. I just want to remind you that this is an all volunteer force, and sometimes we can get it right. So maybe there's some lessons learned that we can grab from the military. Let's go to the next slide. So here's a picture, a multitude of pictures of what our military can look like, right? You can see a bunch of different surface demographics there: male, female, tall, short, white, black, Hispanic, etc. You can also see stuff like uniform, civilian clothes. There's also, we use parachutes, we use guns, we have brawn, we have brains. There are pilots, shooters, security forces, intel specialists, etc. right? But on a deeper surface, I'm actually in one of those photos, top left. That's me in Afghanistan with a set of teammates I was able to be with.
Right here. And
that's us in front of the embassy in Afghanistan many, many moons ago, the largest embassy in the world. Let me tell you what you can't see in that photo. You can't see that there's an LGBTQ soldier in that photo, right? You can't see that the majority of these folks are also actually non-commissioned officers. I was the only officer in that photo. You can't see that there are Air Force people in this joint team, which is made up of mostly Army. You can't tell that this team was split in 2 different countries and we were working from different places on different time zones even. You can't see that there's a person in here who grew up English second language and was gaining their citizenry by joining the force. So this diversity really matters to us in the military, and how we bring it all together makes us effective. And I'm wondering if some of us out there that are professionals and leaders could talk about that diversity out in the civilian sector. Our diversity is also pointed out by our veterans and civilians that work for us. And it's also, you see a photo on there of some families, right? It's extended, our diversity is extended for all the people who are in our homes. I started by describing myself from my family. So that's an important demographic that we must not forget in these conversations. slide, please. So let's get down to the brass tacks of some of this conversation, all right? Some of us don't actually know what D, I, and E are. And before we even have the conversation, we just need to level the bubbles on this stuff so we understand how to have conversations and about what we're talking about. A lot of us understand what diversity is. Bringing a whole bunch of difference into the room to be a part of the team. We also know that the more diverse your team is, the better it performs. We always associate diversity though with those surface demographics, right? Diversity also means difference of opinion, difference of thought, different experience. You can have a team full of white gentlemen. One can be from Scotland, one can be from Alabama, one can be from Australia, and one could be very old and grow up in Germany. I guarantee you there's some diversity of experience on that team, even though it looks different from a surface perspective. I want us to expand what diversity means to us in these conversations and make sure we're including everyone. But diversity is the first step. That's why it's on the bottom left. As you go up a step, you have inclusion, okay? This is about giving people the ability to have a voice at the table. So we brought everybody into the table, diverse group of folks. Inclusion means giving everybody a voice, okay? You have a voice regardless of rank, position, where you come from, status in the company, status in the organization. That's where you start to leverage diversity, is with inclusion. I don't necessarily want to get into a debate over equality versus equity, but we may do so on the next slide. I'll just put it like this. We're going to start with equity, and that's what we want to get after inclusion. And this is about putting people in places to succeed. That it means if you need to accommodate somebody, guess what you do? You accommodate them. You put them in a place to succeed, right? Equality would be us all starting at the same start line on this race. Equity would be pushing a person a little bit further down the track so they have the same abilities as everyone else on the team, especially if they are handicapped in some physical or other way. And we know of some handicaps that we need to talk about tonight. So there might be a question there, so I'll pause there.
So, I heard you say a point. You said diversity is actually a strength. Some people may disagree with that. Some people may say, hey, sure, we're all, my team is a group of guys that I'm comfortable with. They just happen to be of the same demographic as I. Why should I want to diversify my team if I know I'm comfortable with this team and this team has performed?
Because let me put it in a couple different ways. One is I don't have to show you the statistics, but there's been 50, 60 years worth of business research that say you need difference. Okay, it's out there. I don't need to go to find the facts for you to illuminate them. And I say you and the royal you, meaning anyone that's having that conversation. The second thing there is a mentor of mine who does not look like me. I say does because he's still my mentor. Didn't grow up in the same area, never served in the same unit except for when we were teaching at West Point together. We're totally on opposite ends of the spectrum. This gentleman told me when I was talking about being comfortable, he looked at me and he said, square-eyed, you don't strike me as a person that likes to stay comfortable. You seem like you want challenge. We need to create creative friction. And the only way we can create that type of friction is if we have difference. A great quote I heard one time is, if you have a group of 3 people and you all have the same opinion, 2 of those people are needed, right? We want diversity of thought. So regardless of how somebody feels about comfort and I feel good around these people, I will tell you that as long as it's not caustic or toxic or someone is doing something to completely disrupt the team, it's actually good to have a naysayer in the room. It actually propel you to success if you have some difference.
All right. Well, we got some comments that are coming in. Let's go ahead and read some of the comments, and then we've got actually a question as well. So, hey,
Sure.
if y'all have questions or comments, go ahead, type them up, write them up. It doesn't matter. We will get a chance to bring them up and have everyone check it out. Okay. So here's the first. Here's the first comment that's coming in from RJ Spikes Jr. Using both my ears and eyes to fully digest this important conversation. Do you know RJ Spikes?
I might know RJ, of course. I appreciate that, RJ.
Okay, okay. And so we've got, we've got a few, hey, awesome, someone saying looking forward to the conversation, etc. But we've actually got an actual question. And the question is, great conversation. How would you propose people we open conversations?
Reopen conversation? Let me reopen or
let me read that again. It says, great conversation. How would you propose people we open conversations? So I guess the question is, how would you propose to folks? How do you open a conversation? How do we do that?
So it depends on what kind of conversation you're talking about, right? If we're talking about selling cars, then you open that conversation with the subject matter. If we're talking about playing sports, then you open the conversation that way. But if it's in the context of having difficult and hard conversations, I think it starts with trying to understand the other person's point of view. So one of the many ways you can open a conversation around this difficult topic is to maybe ask somebody, hey, have you seen the news? Have you seen what's going on? What's your particular opinion? Or what experiences have you had with this issue? If you know that person, you're close enough to them, and you know that they have kids or something like that, a good way to start a conversation is around, how are you talking to your children about this? Especially if they're of age, of a place where those conversations need to be had in the home. There's a whole myriad, but I would always start from as a leader, placing the onus on the other person to be open and come into the conversation. I wouldn't go at anybody like, hey, this is what I got going on in my life and this is how it's affected me. What do you think? I would be more open to the approach of starting the conversation just simply by asking the folks around you what is going on in their lives. Maybe they don't even know about it. Maybe they have been under a bridge or under a rock that I would love to find so I can get some of that quietness too myself. And maybe they don't know what's going on. So I think it's, if you can be caring and appreciative and genuinely interested in their point of view, and as Dale Carnegie would say, get them to talk about themselves and what is important to them, you'll have them, they'll talk. I'm sure of it.
I will say, typically the race conversation is always a tough one to have in multiple workspaces, whether it be in the civilian side or in the military side. But, one positive that did occur the past couple of days is the highest ranked people in our military, Army-wise anyways, have opened that conversation door. So our Chief of Staff, the Sergeant Major of the Army, and the Secretary of the Army has kind of given us the nudge to, hey, it's okay to have that conversation. Heck, the Sergeant Major of the Army just publicly put out there, and this is information a lot of folks weren't aware of, he is half black, half white, and he spoke about his racial identity issues that he had as a child and now as an adult, and we thought it was a great thing. So I would encourage, if you're trying to have that conversation and you're wondering, you're a bit timid about having it, it has been initiated by the higher up. So you, in a proverbial sense, do have permission to go about and have that conversation.
Yes, I think at these times we got to be courageous. And if you need other examples, you can look across the other services too. I'm on an Air Force base, so I know about the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, Wright, and his pretty much viral post about him talking about the experiences he had he's had, and comparing himself to some of the names that I read off earlier, we've already been given permission, if you wear a uniform, to have these conversations. And I would tell you, if we can have a hard conversation about sexual assault and harassment and those issues, we can definitely have a hard conversation about these issues and these racial tensions, because unfortunately, actually fortunately, we're a diverse force, and we have people of all races, creeds, and backgrounds in our formations. So as a leader, we got to step up. We got to step up and get out there.
Yeah. Yes. Excellent. I know we have another question that's coming in, but I'm going to save that question for later on as we go. So let's go ahead and jump back into the slides. Okay.
All right, let's dive back in. All right, so we can go to the next slide on this one. I want to debunk on this next slide. I want to debunk this meme. I want to tell y'all to stop using it. Here's where I start getting radical. Okay, like this is me. I should say that these are my views, not the DOD's, not the Army's. These are Chevy Cook's views. These are all my opinions. I don't stand on any other thing but my own experience. But I will tell you, we need to stop sharing this meme. We need to stop using it to describe equality, equity, and reality. There's a great article written about this meme, talking about what's messed up about it and versions of it. Okay, let me tell you what the problem is with this meme. So they kind of get it right on equality and equity and the reality, and some of that might be exaggerated, some of it might not. The problem here is the fence. Okay, the fence is the problem, not the boxes, not the skin color, not the shortness, not the height, not the ditch, and not the, in the reality one, the number of boxes. The problem is the fence. Okay, that's the problem with this meme. When we can move toward breaking down barriers, i.e. the fence, that's when we'll be in a better place. We're worrying too much about stacking boxes right now, when we need to remove the fence. The fence is the problem. Next slide, please. Okay. All right. Here's why I harp on diversity, inclusion, and equity all together. If you just have equity and inclusion, your organization does not benefit from the creativity and innovation that diversity offers. If you just have equity and diversity but no inclusion, your folks don't do their best work, or they leave because they don't feel included. If you have diversity and inclusion but neither equity nor equality, morale is low, people are mad because they simply don't feel like they are treated fairly or equitably, and they will also leave. So you got to have all three. It's a trifecta that you need. You can't sit on this stool with just two of the legs. The key here is recognizing what your subconscious tendency is and how you just gravitate toward those who look like you. Okay, cloning was bad in Star Wars. It's bad in this situation too. The second key here is you got to help others to see it, right? We all have a conscious bias. We all have heuristics that we fall back on. You need to help others see their blind spots. All right. The last key here is you need to diversify your not only your friend groups, but your work groups, your social media groups, etc., to ensure we are properly preparing ourselves and the next generation. When we can have conversations with different people, when you can have different people around you, is when we'll be able to bridge difference. Slide, please. All right, I'm kind of closing down this initial section, and I'm a nerd, so I read. And I think a nerd is actually a compliment. It's the greatest compliment. My daughter, I'm serious, it's one of the greatest compliments my daughter ever gave me, calling me a nerd. And I love to read, and reading has expanded not only some of my thought process, but my own experience, because I can reach into somebody else's. Let's start with the book to the left. If you really want to understand what's going on in America right now, these are hard books to read. The one on the left, if you notice, it's of course, Learning from the Germans is the title. Susan Neiman is a philosopher. But what you notice on the cover is that is a Confederate statue, CSA, Confederate States of America, right? She's talking, this is a Jewish woman who lived in Tel Aviv, who's been American educated, was born and raised here in the South, and then ends up going to Germany before the wall fell and had certain experiences, and then after the wall fell and had certain experiences as well. And she argues that some of the reason we've had the issues in America is because we haven't dealt with issues of race and the memory of evil in the way the Nazis have. Let me frame it this way. You can go to multiple places in the States, but you can also go to multiple places in Germany, and you can see an actual boxcar that took people to concentration camps. Not a remake, not a refurbished, like the actual boxcar that had people on it that were sent off to their death. It's a vivid structural reminder of what that was about. That would be the equivalent, and you can see this in Berlin, by the way. That would be the equivalent of us dredging up a slave ship and putting it somewhere in DC. We don't have anything like that. She brings that point up very poignantly, and she goes through some of the history of this stuff as well. Slide one over, you have Carol Anderson's White Rage. This book is a New York Times bestseller, but it is phenomenally written and researched. And Carol Anderson really walks it back and talks about this kind of tit for tat or back and forth. When we made progress, some people pulled us back a little bit. When we made some more progress, then we backslid a little. For example, we got rid of separate but equal. We passed Brown versus Board of Education comes through, and we say we need to desegregate schools. There were schools in America, there were states in America that closed schools. For everybody, white, black, and different, closed schools to say, well, if this quote unquote Negro is coming to my school, I'm gonna shut it down for everyone. Oh, by the way, that's when you see a whole birth of private schools, and vouchers were for private schools so people could go to private school, because if you got to pay for it, you don't have to follow certain laws and rules. And she walks all that back about how sometimes structurally we fought back against our own progress. Mm-hmm. The last one here is very well known, the New Jim Crow, and it talks about mass incarceration. You will hear about Brian Stevenson's work in here with the Equal Justice Initiative. You'll actually hear about him in Susan Neiman's book as well. But sobering stats are in that book, okay? Mm-hmm. America today is about 13.2% African American. We house 2.3 million people in our prison system, the most by far of any other nation. 40% of those folks, 40, are African American. That's sobering, okay? And she gets into the details of that. So if you really want to have a conversation about this stuff, if you really want to understand it, regardless of what your skin tone or background is, please pick up these books and get to reading. Next slide. Now we're going to talk a little bit about influence and how to be an influencer. Slide. All right. That to me looks like a bunch of hands, but it also looks like a brain. But it depends on how I shape the conversation for you, what you believe, what you perceive, what you see. Influencing people is not something you actually do to them, but rather it's how you shape, mold, and present the information. For some folks, they might have initially just straight up seen a brain before I pointed out that those were hands, okay? Influence doesn't occur until the message is received and believed by the participant. This means that the initial response to our efforts at influence are actually intellectual. So we probably should err on the side of appealing to intellect rather than emotion. Reason is where Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle would start. Think about it from this perspective. I am a psychological operations officer in the Army. I tried my best to shape, mold, and present information. If influences the projectile, And your communicative ability is the weapon system. Then empathy, active listening, synthesis of information, humility, and self-control are all the ingredients in the gunpowder behind that bullet. Okay? And we got to think like that. Our words can be weapons, right? Sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt. No, words hurt. Okay? But words can heal too and help. And there's a whole host of quotes floating around the web right now that are healing, okay, on the other end of some of the hate that we've seen. Next slide, please. So here's how do you do it though? Where's the brass tacks? What are you trying to get toward? This is about stretching conversations, expanding people's thoughts and beliefs and narratives. So I want to distinguish between persuasion and influence. Chris Widener says in his book, The Art of Influence, he says that persuasion is about convincing somebody of something. He defines it as persuasion is something you do to somebody. Influence, though, in contrast, is something, it's actually less about you and more about them, right? He defines influence as one's ability to change another person's thoughts, beliefs, or actions. So influence is something within the other person. And we need to think from that perspective. When you're trying to be influential, it's about them believing in something you're saying, them changing their thoughts, as opposed to you doing something to them. No one likes a used car salesman, and we don't need more of them right now. There are 3 outcomes of influence techniques, and they're across this screen. Commitment is where we want to be, okay? It's where enthusiastic agreement is, demonstrated initiative and assistance. One level back from that, though, is compliance. If you got on a uniform, you know exactly what that looks like, right? Begrudged acceptance requires nothing but rules and some prodding. And none of us really want compliance, but we'll take it. We think we don't want resistance, argumentative pushback. I would argue you actually do. I want somebody to debate me on these topics. I want somebody to push back on me about race relations in America. Because if they can resist, guess what they have? They have a position. And you can maneuver from a position just like 2 formations on a battlefield. Okay? I'd rather have resistance than apathy. Apathy is the absence of it all, the I don't care-ness, right? So when you're trying to influence somebody, yeah, you want to get the commitment, yeah, you'll take compliance, but I would actually take resistance as well, because at least they have a positionality about themselves, and it invites a conversation, regardless of how bad they want to hate on me, spit on me, or whatever they want to say. I grew up in South Carolina, the Confederate flag on top of my state house, so I'm ready for those conversations too. I'll pause there.
Speaking of spitting on you, did you see recently in the news with the attorney spitting on folks? Insane. People are absolutely insane out there, but you know, it is what it is.
As I started, man, some of this is about losing our humanity, right?
Yeah.
And on the one end, you know, somebody spitting on me would make me want to fight. And on the other end, you know, there's a nice quote that I came across that be careful about what you get angry about, because that shows the size of your character. So on the other end, because I want to speak from both ends of the spectrum, I've been thrown up on by my daughter, right? That's way worse than a little drop of spit, right? And I'm not trying to minimize the issue at all. I'm trying to talk from both ends of the spectrum. And I think the ability to hold those dual narratives in our heads as we walk forward, as we get to be the Martin and the Malcolm, is what is going to make us more powerful.
Are you a left-hander or a right-hander?
I'm a righty. And I was a boxer too, by the way.
So you know why I'm asking you this, right? Because you said the Malcolm with your right hand, and then the Martin with your left hand. So I'm like, hold on, is the heavier punch with the right hand? What are you trying to say to us? Are you doing some PSYOP stuff? But
no,
I appreciate
not at all. Not at all.
Okay, good. Let's go ahead and bring up some of these questions. Actually,
Okay.
let's bring up a comment that was dropped already. And we got one from Ebony Calhoun. What's going on, Ebony? She said this great point. Get rid of the fences. Yep.
Get rid of
I
the
agree.
fence.
Get rid of
The
the
fence
fences.
is the problem. The fence is the problem. Every time I see that, and I've been given training similar to this in a lot of places, and people always bring up that meme, and I always hone in on the fence. The fence is the problem. We won't need no boxes. We don't care about the ditch or any of that stuff. We can fix all that much easier once you don't have the fence. So thanks, Ebony.
Good deal, good deal. And then we got two good questions that's coming in.
Okay.
We've got from Will. He says, sir, great discussion thus far. Major Cook, how do you create a team that fully executes matters in everything the team does, and not seem self-serving or pretentious in the process?
I'm gonna take a kind of a wild view or a different view. I remember I'm kind of radical on some of this stuff. Here, I don't want a winning team, and let me tell you why, because that sounds weird. What I want is a team that's willing to fail, doesn't shirk off failure, and can learn from the experience. That's my weird way of looking at what winning might be. Right? If you consistently always win, no matter what, not to quote T-Pain or anything there, but
DJ Khaled.
right. If you're only doing that, you are only building the pedestal to an epic failure, right? But that's a kind of weird way of maybe answering his question. But I can hold two positions at once. How do you create a team that basically gets beyond self, is self-transcendent? I truly do think it's in organizational culture and the values you place in front of the people. If people can have something called horizontal or vertical loyalty. So we all understand horizontal loyalty, all right?
Yeah.
Loyalty to, I will not leave a fallen comrade. That might be in a motto or two, or a credo that we say, right? We understand the person in the foxhole next to us. We understand our teammates here, but create vertical loyalty. Vertical loyalty isn't just to the chain of command. Vertical loyalty is to institutional principles. Vertical loyalty is, having a vision, a mission, purpose, key task, end state that is beyond self. That's how you create a team that wins, a team that understands something beyond. And maybe part of this question is about you not looking self-serving or pretentious yourself, right? As you talk about all this highfalutin stuff, well, you personalize it. You remain authentic. You actually show them who you are. Look, I talk like this to my daughters. I talk like this to my neighbors. I'm this person in and out of uniform, online, offline, at home, with friends, with cousins, at the barbecue. It don't matter where I'm at. This is who I am authentically. So everyone knows, who really truly knows me, knows that this is me. Knows
you
that
don't
this
code
is
switch
truly...
at all?
No, absolutely not. No, I don't need to. I grew up speaking like this. I still go back to the same neighborhood, 1017 Chartel Circle in South Carolina. My mom still lives in the same house with bars on all our windows, 5 locks on the front door, 3 locks on the back, and she still puts that little bar up under the door handle so it don't get kicked in, because it did when I was a kid. And I can talk to people in my community just like I'm talking to you now, because they know who I am and they understand my intent and they know my heart, they know my mind, and they know this voice and they know this face, because I still go, right? So when people see you the same way all the time and you are accepting of them, I think you can just be who you are. But that's just my kind of 2 cents.
Excellent, excellent. Let's go ahead and jump into the next question that I saw.
Okay.
So the question, it comes from McCluckster West. What's going on, West? His brother, I was active duty with his brother back in the days. So
okay.
The question is, when you don't like what you hear, how do you keep the conversation productive? Good topics, Otis. Get better guests as always. Yeah. Yeah.
When you don't like what you hear,
Yeah.
how do you keep the conversation productive?
Productive.
That's a tough one. I think you remove the valence, meaning you're attaching a like dislike to the conversation. The conversation is what it is. I'll pull up this, and people who know me, who've seen me in person, have seen me do this before. This is a blue pen. It's blue. I'm not a magician. This pen ain't changing. It's blue. There's a fact to it, right? And we just assign it that value that it's just blue, right? The pen is blue. So if the person is caustic or the conversation, it's just a conversation. Why are we I didn't tell you whether this was a good pen or a bad pen, right? We just recognize it as a pen. So if we went into conversations, letting the conversation define itself as opposed to us putting a valence on it, that would make some of these hard conversations a little bit easier. So what somebody said, look, I would stand across from somebody who wanted to debate me on these topics that were spewing expletives and the N-word, and I would still be right where I'm at. Because I got young kids in my house that yell and scream and all of that stuff too and get me frustrated. But what do I need to do? I need to remain balanced. I need to remain right here. And I need to be able to zoom out from the moment and then zoom back in so I can maintain some semblance of control, self-regulation, character, and who I am and my authenticity, right? Some people get me mad, and I bring that madness out when I need to. Conversations, man, conversations really ain't necessarily gonna get me mad. You gotta push me really hard in a conversation to get me fired up. If I don't anger, I go get my wife from upstairs. Anybody knows me know this. I don't argue with my wife, so why would I argue with anybody else out here in this world, right? So and she's a black woman from the South, like she can get at it. But we are in a place where we can have productive conversations. No.
So my wife is a black woman from the South. We don't argue, but I love a good argument to bring it to anyone at any time. But maybe I need to be more selective in who I give that equity of an Otis Toussaint argument to. I need to be more mindful of that and careful with that. That's excellent.
I tell my young daughter, who I can have these conversations with in London, I tell her, when things are getting frustrated, when stuff are getting hard, especially in conversations, again, you got to be careful who you give your emotion to, who you give your tears to, who you give that hard or soft piece of you to. You got to be careful about that, because some people out there in this world are evil and they'll rip it away from you and rip you apart. If the conversation is going down south, no pun intended, you got to know when to step away.
Yeah.
Whether do I need to continue to engage? Is this beyond resistance and this is going to be something forceful, or can I turn it back productive? And I truly do think the way you turn it back productive is you see what they're so fired up about. You see why they're pulling out all these wild statistics or whatever they may be using. It's about meeting them where they are if you really want to have that conversation. That's my maybe 1 cent.
Well, excellent points. I'd like to have you jump back into the slides if that's okay.
All right, let's do it.
All right, here we go.
All right, so you can go ahead to the next one. I think I've hit that one pretty hard. So I've talked about Dale Carnegie a little bit. This is a seminal book here, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Look, we could be on this webinar for 8 days straight with everything that's out there with regard to influence. But I wouldn't be doing you justice. You need to hear it from other folks as well. And this is one of the key go-tos that I read a long time ago, that everyone has read along the way, has been reprinted in a bunch of different languages. And you can see on the screen there a bunch of his kind of points. I'm gonna point out one because we just really talked about it. Avoid arguments. In this section of the book, he has a great quote. I've come to one conclusion, that there is only one way to get the best of an argument, and it's to avoid them. Avoid them, he says, avoid them like rattlesnakes and earthquakes. And what he's doing in that part of the book is he's talking about sometimes you just gotta, somebody could be hard down arguing a fact like something like, let me see, Karl Malone had the highest statistical points per game average of all time. Now, anybody who's been alive for the last 30 years knows there might be a person who wore a Bulls uniform or something like that that might have been above Karl Malone, right? The person might be completely wrong by saying that. And if you don't know who Karl Malone is from the Utah Jazz, he's a Hall of Fame player that retired some years ago now. That can be a completely false statement. Why dive in on them if it's just going to cause something really bad? Maybe you just step away. Maybe you just let them save face, even especially if it's in front of others. We could learn a lot from some Eastern cultures who rather defer to people around them because they have a more collectivist nature than point out when somebody's wrong, just to dive into the argument. Okay, so just something to think about. Next slide. But I'd be remiss if I didn't share some others with you, right? I'm an influence. I call myself a wannabe influence professional. I'd be wrong of you not to share Cialdini's book. And he talks about a couple different principles there. And he did a lot of research on stuff like used car salesmen to figure out how people are getting you to buy these, when people used to walk up to your door and try to sell you a vacuum. But there's some principles there that he says are consistent in these conversations that can get people to your side of the table, right? There's a piece in there about similarity that is important right now. While we may have different skin tones, when we're having these conversations, maybe you reach far down deep inside and you actually look for the pieces of sameness between us. I tell you what, when I was overseas, and I might have been talking to somebody that's a complete different side of the spectrum, and maybe even wants to kill me, the majority of us had kids. You know how quickly you can come to somebody's softer side when you get them to talk about that piece of similarity, that we both are fathers, that we both are mothers, right? I just watched Just Mercy, right? It's streaming for free right now. It's a story about Brian Stevenson and his life and his book and the Equal Justice Initiative. And in there, he gets the gentleman who put Jamie Foxx's character, who lied about Jamie Foxx's character and put him on death row. He gets him to start thinking about the fact that they both had kids. And that's what started the conversation, that piece of similarity, all right? Some others that are across there, I mentioned Chris Widener's Art of Influence earlier. He has 4 golden rules of influence in this book. It's great. Live a life of undivided integrity. Starts with character, right? Always demonstrate a positive attitude. Consider other people's interests as more important than yours. Don't settle for anything less than excellence. Slide one over. I taught next to Joe McCormick, the author of Brief, in USASOC. We taught young lions. We did some mentorship stuff down there. Gandhi has this quote about speak only to improve upon the silence, right? Only say not what needs to be said, but something that actually improves the conversation. In Brief, he also talks about a little bit about passion and emotion. Remember that passion is a quote. Remember that passion isn't always sentiment. Mature professionals decide to communicate with belief regardless of how they're feeling. Slide one more over. Say anything. Another great book about how to lead and say what's on your mind. It talks about positive intent and your authentic self. If someone doesn't trust you, it doesn't matter how much you measure your words. The other person will misinterpret you. But on the other side, he says, the authors say, if someone trusts you implicitly, it doesn't matter how poorly you phrase something, because the other person will assume that you meant well. Powerful, powerful stuff. The last one there is radical inclusion. Best definition of inclusion I've ever heard of. He wrote this with Martin Dempsey, a person we all have come to respect over the years. Here's a quote about inclusion. It's about a sense of belonging. We often think of diversity and inclusion as simply the act of not excluding, of not barring anyone. The kind of inclusion we're talking about isn't about admission, it's about participation. That's powerful. It's not about excluding, it's about how you think about who can participate around you and who you bring to participate. Powerful books. I would suggest you get them all. They're sitting all on my shelf right outside of this office. Slide, please. All right, stuff we want to avoid. Improvised explosive devices, if you don't know what IEDs stand for. Slide, please. All right, this is a touchy one. We've all heard this conversation as of late, but don't all lives matter? Of course they do, but it's just like the sign that they're holding up there. Right now, we're focused on the community that's hurting, okay? Right now, there is one set of individuals, one type of individual in our country that represents 40% of our incarcerated folks. That is only 13% of our population. I don't know how that's even possible, but it's happening, okay? There is a whole set of individuals who have died over the last couple of years that look like me, that have my skin tone, okay? So Black lives truly matter right now. And look, if you're having this conversation and somebody is telling you, but don't all lives matter? They're drawing you into a trap, okay? Acknowledge that all lives matter. But I want them to push. I want you to push on somebody to get them to say, to get them to admit that Black lives matter, right? If all lives matter, thusly the subset is Black lives in there too. But I want you to push them to think about other people matter. This is a different type of hashtag. Other people matter, okay? That is, other people has nothing to do with race, okay? If you can get people to believe that other people matter, that means everyone outside of your brain. Get them to believe in other people mattering, right? Other people, meaning other people can start in your home. Other people matter are my kids. Other people mattering to me is my wife. Other people mattering are my neighbors, right? Regardless of race, creed, background, right? Push the conversation toward other people matter, while also getting people to recognize, yes, all lives matter, but right now we're talking about Black lives. Slide, please.
Excellent.
Here's IED number 2. Now, I don't know these people. This is just a cliche shot that I got from some student pamphlet that's trying to show diversity. And it represents this conversation that I've had that I think is an IED as well. Well, I grew up in a place where, everyone was connected, and, I just didn't, we all didn't talk about anything hard, and everybody got together. And I tell you what, I grew up I've never been racist. My family's not racist. We come from X place in the country. That's not enough. I want to say this very loud. That's not enough. It's not enough to be not racist. I was reminded by a friend of mine this week who had that conversation, a white gentleman having this conversation with me, that said, hey, Chevy, as much as he's kissed my kids, okay? He has been in my house. We've broken bread. We've done a lot of stuff together. He said to me, it's not enough for me to not be racist. I need to be anti-racist, right? One must be anti-racist, anti-prejudice, anti-abuse of power, anti-intolerance, anti-inequality, anti-entitlement for us to really have a conversation. This is a proactive stance, okay? If they're telling you, well, I never really, I came from a place where I'm not a racist, that's not enough, okay? Avoid the IED, vector them onto the conversation about being proactive and being anti and not reactionary. Slide, please.
Excellent.
Here's another major IED. This actually might be a VB IED, right? This is one of them vehicle-borne ones that's heavy laden, like 1,000 pounds. It's it's obliterating. It's putting such a crater in the earth, right? I don't see color. Okay, listen. That they are baiting you into a conversation that is gonna go just, I think, badly. This is an IED. I saw my wife in a conversation correct a gentleman who said this, and she just simply said, hey, if you don't see color, you don't see me. Okay, that's a simple way to respond if you are a person of color. If you are another person who is saying this, I can't beg you enough to stop saying it. Okay, you're the only people who don't see color are unfortunately they're colorblind. Okay, and none of us are colorblind. You can see I shouldn't say none of us. Many of us are not colorblind. You can walk outside and see what the sky looks like. You can see the green in the grass. You can see the foliage around you. Okay, so don't say that about people. But if you're in a formation that says that has this going on, I'm gonna specifically talk to our military folks. If you have a sergeant major, a senior leader, whoever it may be, even a young person, I'm talking about they only see green, they only see soldier, they only see airman, they only see Marine. You need to stand up and you need to be a leader, and you need to tell them that language is inappropriate. Okay. And I'll make a quick parallel, a really simple parallel. Okay. If you don't see difference, why do we have pregnancy PT policies? Why do we have different uniforms for women who are pregnant? Why do we stop people from taking the APFT at a certain point? Because we care about that unborn child. Are you telling me you don't see, or I only see soldier? But in this one exception, I can see that this lady is pregnant. In that situation, we want to take care of the woman. We want to take care of her and that unborn child. We care enough that we move them off of physical fitness plans. We definitely wouldn't see them taking the ACFT. So you actually do see difference, right? And it's a physical difference as well. So you're telling me that you can acknowledge physical difference. If you can acknowledge a pregnant belly, you can definitely acknowledge a brown skin tone, or a different eye shape, or a different hair texture. So I would invite people to, especially if they're in uniform, talk about how we see difference when it comes to a pregnant soldier. We definitely see it, and maybe vector that to a softer conversation, because all of us, we tend to love children, and we tend to recognize that as a simple way we can see difference physically. So I'll pause there.
And I love the presentation. I love the points that you're making. Maybe I'm just playing devil's advocate. And
sure.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. But someone may hear that point, hey, I don't see color. You said as for your example, a sergeant major saying that all they see is green, etc. I don't think there are many who will have the personal courage, even though it's one of our things in the military, step up and say, hey, sergeant major, I do see color. Hey, sergeant major, people do see my color.
Right.
That's one of those things. I've heard that in my military and my civilian career, and I think it's a bunch of BS, honestly. Why? Because absolutely you do see color. And if I do agree with that point. Hey, if you don't see color, then you don't see me. When you say don't see me, I'm talking about my experience and those that look like me and our experience. And if you don't see color, you're dismissive of the experience that people may have gone through. And that in itself creates that environment that we're in right now, where it feels like we've opened up the dam where people could go and say the things that's really affecting them personally. Why was there a dam in the first place? That's the wall thing that you were talking about. That's the fence thing,
right? So I appreciate you bringing up this part of the conversation, because if it's a young E4 and big bad sergeant major, battalion, or brigade level, it says something like that in front of the formation, or next to that soldier, or in a closed door conversation, it's gonna be very hard to push back. this is what I had to say about that. Remember that the context of this conversation we're having right now is about leadership. While it may be hard to have that personal courage, if you call yourself or want to call yourself a leader, that is one of those rare situations that opens itself up to you to be one, right? Regardless of your rank, your position, that's an opportunity for you to step in and right the wrong. That's an opportunity for you to step up and show your leadership capability. I'm not going to say that someone wouldn't give somebody UCMJ for how they attempt to do that. I'm not saying from the back of the formation, scream out like, "Sorry, Major, you're an idiot." That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about using some of the conversational influence tactics, the ideas we've had in this conversation, and doing it in an appropriate place, right? I think as a person of color, the way I kind of walk the world sometimes, well, most of the time, is I think I'm kind of in two modes. I'm either in assimilation mode, because sometimes I need to fit in, right? Anybody needs to fit in. I want a sense of community wherever I am. So sometimes it's about me just assimilating and fitting. Then at other times, it's about me educating and showing people what's wrong. If kids are touching my little daughter's hair, I need to say, "Don't pet her. She's not an animal." Right? Well, I just want to see because it's a different. No, you're not petting your other friend's hair that's kind of straight, right? That's a point of, right, jump in and educate. Both of them are leadership situations, though. I think the time for assimilation, when you are trying to fit in, is I'm not assimilating when someone's trying to touch my hair, because that happens too, right? That's the time for education. You got to be very good about the assimilation education. It's got to be turned on and off in the moment. It's not I assimilate while I'm in this organization for 3 years and then I go back into education mode. No, this is at all times. And I think it's a leader's ability to figure out when they just need to fit in is also a point of character. If you can find, okay, right now it's not appropriate for me to bring it up in front of the whole formation. But I tell you what, when we break from this formation, get away from this modal pool, and I get some time to get on the Sergeant Major's calendar, I'm gonna go up there and talk about this certain situation so I can then turn into education mode. You see what I'm saying?
Gotcha. I was watching a special with James Baldwin yesterday, and he spoke about civil rights. Why do we need, what's the civil rights thing all about? Why do we need, if we're citizens, why do we need to have civil rights? If we're truly citizens. But that's just a throwaway comment there. I don't want to really dive too much into that, because I know we're limited in our time anyways, right? So
sure.
Let's jump back into some of the slides. Let me know when you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready. You can go to the next one. We're getting here short. This is a very recent photo. Here's the last IED. Looting. I can't deal with the criminality. Why are people tearing up their own communities? Here's how I'm gonna push back on that, and here's how I want you to avoid that conversation. First of all, let's talk brass tacks. If you really think those people in those communities own those Walgreens, own those Rite Aids, own that local Walmart or whatever they're tearing apart, you're sadly confused, right? Most of our people don't own those things in those neighborhoods. Secondly, if you can't unearth, this is how I would vector the conversation as well. If you can't unearth the original criminality, we're talking about an extrajudicial killing on the street that was watched for 8 minutes and 43 seconds. That dude wasn't Mirandized, he wasn't taken to court, he wasn't put on trial in front of his peers, et cetera, et cetera. If you can't see that original criminality, then we're almost at an impasse. Because the original criminality, when you peel back the onion, bred or unearthed or brought up the quote unquote current criminality that people have a problem with. The other thing I want to vector people onto is, hey, take some time and do your research. There are entities, which I will not name, that come from other places that want to sow seeds of concern in our country that want to separate us, that foment this type of stuff. It has been documented in the past week of people who don't look like me that are burning things and spray painting things and doing other stuff that ain't a part of the Black Lives Matter movement, ain't a part of our community, and might have an accent from a different country, okay? If you can't, and this is not conspiracy theory stuff, just look it up. We have something called the internet, which is great nowadays. So that is happening too, right? The last thing I'm going to quickly remind folks of is I can't stress enough, please read Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail. Okay, it's going out to white Christian pastors, and he's pleading for their assistance. Let me read you a couple of lines that sound like they could have came from today. We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over and men are no longer willing to be plunged into the abyss of despair. He also says, if one recognizes this vital urge that has engulfed the Negro community, one should readily understand why public demonstrations are taking place. The Negro has many pent-up resentments and latent frustrations, and he must release them. So let him march and try to understand why he must do so. If his repressed emotions are not released in non-violent ways, at times they will seek expression through violence. This is not a threat, but it's a fact of history. Read that letter. That letter is from almost 50, 60 years ago. I was reminded by Colonel Candace Pipes in Active Duty Air Force 06 this weekend on a panel of these quotes. And this is a powerful piece of the conversation. This is where you get when you can't converse. This is where we get to when we can't bridge differences. This is where we get to when we can't see that just the pen is blue. This is where we get when we say stuff like, I don't see color, or all lives matter, and not recognize what is truly going on in our country. Okay? Slide, please.
Wow.
So here's some ideas. So I've broken everything down. I'd be remiss if I didn't give you some other pointers as you go about your business. This is leadership business. I truly do believe it is, and it starts with your character. So Maya Angelou, I put out a statement this week from military mentors, and I started with this quote from Maya Angelou. Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Everything we've been talking about tonight is about knowing better. And so now that I've given you some stuff and I'm about to give you a couple more, go out there and do better. Slide, please. All right, this is a leadership conversation. Leaders intervene. We have to be upstanders. There's no time for being a bystander anymore. Complacency stokes the coals of prejudice. I say that again. Complacency stokes the coals of prejudice. People who stand by in moments like these, I can't say it enough, are complicit with the blatant injustice. That doesn't matter what color skin you are. That doesn't matter what part of the country you're from. If you are standing by, you are complacent. If you are standing by, I count you as complicit. Now, I'm not saying you have to go riot. I'm not saying that you have to burn down whatever establishments near you. But if you can't be anti-prejudice, anti-intolerance, anti-abuse of power, anti-racist, at this point, you're probably complicit, in my view. And notice in the picture, that's not a black man's hand. Because what ends up happening in the majority of these situations is this is a time for majority folks to step in and intervene. When you just step away, when you say, well, it's not happening in my community, well, our communities are right next to your communities, and this stuff is affecting you as well, right? It's right here at all of our doorsteps. Leaders intervene. That doesn't matter. My skin tone doesn't make me a leader. it contributes to who I am. I'm a leader first, a man of character. I'll pause there.
Man. Ooh, man.
I can do this all day, Otis.
What are some examples? Let me ask. This is my question. What are some examples of, you can tell someone is just complacent?
Oh, yeah. Some examples of complacency?
Yeah, what are some of these examples? What are some of the, because I've been on a freaking clean house social media stream lately where people who I feel are, you know, not just being, they're not anti, you know, whatever. They're just, hey, I'm not racist. No, you've got to be actively anti-racist as well. Those that I feel that are just, I remove them. But how can you tell when someone is just being complacent? What are some of the examples so that people could know, hey, this is what you need to look out for?
First of all, when they're just kind of complacent and just I don't need to really do anything, they're probably not paying attention to the news. They're probably not paying attention to what's going on. They're probably avoiding the conversation, right? And in a big way, that's like the easy stuff. The bigger ways are when someone says something in the office, or when it's like a little racial slight, or it's a funny joke that is off color, that it doesn't even raise an eyebrow. That's when complacency starts to get to being complicit and being in a dangerous situation. And our eyes gotta be on that. Interestingly enough, I think, at least in my personal experience, my hackles I'm always kind of on sonar for that type of stuff. The little slights and the little microaggressions because of the situation I'm in. You know, I've been called the N-word. I grew up in South Carolina. I've been pulled over for driving too slow. I've been, the dog whistle of you don't look like you from around here, boy. And we all know what that means in South Carolina. So my radar is always up. We got to get other people to like turn on some of that radar, and they are complacent when you look around and you notice that somebody says something that wasn't truly right, and people just keep on eating their lunch or clicking away on their keyboard or wherever you may be working. They just let things slide. And that stuff I truly do think that stuff is dangerous. If we can say stuff like, if you see something, say something in the airport, and we can be all wary of a misplaced bag or someone that looks like a foreigner, and we can be worried about getting on the airplane, we can be cognizant of some of this other stuff as well.
Yeah, good point. Excellent point. Let's go back. Let's go back to the slides.
All right, one slide forward, please. Here's another important piece of the conversation we got to get people to. Okay. Whether people will say, well, that's your subjective experience. Let's have an objective conversation around it, right? And it always seems like it's like this picture. It's two different points of view. It's two different types of people. Certain people are always subjective. Certain people want to get to the logical part of it, the objective. The important space is the gray space in between. We need to be able to move the conversation to intersubjectivity. If you've never heard that word or that piece of philosophy, I would invite you to look into it a little bit deeper. We all know what intergroup activities are, right? You know, the interactions between us, interaction, right? We understand what inter means, I believe. But think about what intersubjective is, okay? Think about what difference truly is between us, all right? Race exists because we made it exist. I can't emphasize that enough. Here's a quote from Lois Zachary and Lisa Fain's book, Bridging Differences for Better Mentoring. She broke it down like this. We often see someone and think they are different, but people are not inherently different. Our differences lie between us, not within us. We've all heard forever, if you cut me and you cut yourself, and we bleed the same color. Unless you've been drinking more than me, if we look at our livers, they look the same. Unless you've been smoking more than me, then our lungs look the same, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we don't truly believe that, though. because we don't understand intersubjectivity. We do when it comes to money. Money is something, to break it down really simply, something that's intersubjective, that was made up, okay? A dollar or a $100 bill, they're just a piece of money with some ink on it. The coins we dug out of the ground that were originally minerals are just pieces of metal that we gave value to. That is intersubjective. We both agree between us that this piece of paper or these pieces of metal have value, but they inherently actually really don't. They're just paper and metal. The same thing can be said about things like race. We have made them into what they are. We built these things up. And if you truly want to look into some of the history about what race means in America, because we've pretty much defined it for the world, it started out in a very intersubjective way, and then we legalized a lot of it, which is why we have this systematic injustices and oppression and the issues that we have today. But when we can move people to the space to talk about what's between us, as opposed to believing it's within us, that's when we'll start to have very powerful conversations and maybe even change some laws along the way. Slide, please. All right, I selfishly have put my own kids on the screen. And this is for a reason. I didn't want to go get a stock photo of somebody else's kids, because this is my last point. And this is a hard one to swallow, but this is something I reflected on all week, okay? My generation, so I was born in 1980, I'll be 40 in September. Even though I probably look on screen that I'm about 25. I'll be 40. I'll be 40 very shortly, okay? And I'm blessed to have lived this long, and I hope to live much longer because of the people on this screen. I truly believe people that are at our generational level were warriors, and we need to keep fighting, and we're carrying on the legacy of folks before us like Martin Luther King, Ralph Abernathy, Malcolm X, James Baldwin, Marcus Garvey, and a whole host of other folks, right? We're carrying on their legacy. But I think just at the stance we're in right now, we might have missed the boat on this. We got more work to do and we need to push it forward. But I actually think the people who are going to get the ball into the end zone, to use a football quote, are the people on the screen. It's our next generation. It's our kids. And I'm going to take a very radical position by saying that, but I want to break it down very simply this way. I started watching I Am Not Your Negro, that's a story about James Baldwin with London, the tallest one in that photo, this morning, right? And she's seeing stuff that she's not really seen before, that they don't really share in schools. But I wanted to show her how she can be a part of the problem solver because of her generation. Look, everyone who's older than me had to do a cataclysmic mental shift. You know, the people who fought for civil rights, they saw segregated schools. They saw white-only bathrooms. And eventually, even if today they are inclusive and loving and married interracially or whatever, they still had to do a mental shift from all that was in the media and everything around them. They had to shift. If you're my generation, if you're about my age, you still had an other group growing up, right? You might have not called people the N-word. You might have not had disparaging remarks for other folks, to include disparaging comments for majority folks, white folks. But you definitely use some unfit language toward the LGBT community, right? When I was a kid, if you were a male and you acted kind of feminine, we used a certain set of language to pick on you about it. And we were pretty harsh about that. And it took time, and it took laws, and it took a whole change of society for us now to accept the LGBTQ community. But guess what? I will fully admit that I had to make a mental shift to do so. And I will fully admit that a lot of people around me had to do the same thing. So we had to do a mental shift that I don't think was as difficult as our parents and older generations because of what they saw. But I'm not going to sit here and act like, you know, all of us were inclusive and accepting growing up. But guess what? Guess what the beauty is about all of this? Our kids are growing up in a generation that finally doesn't have an other. They finally are in a super inclusive environment that's legally inclusive and also is not in their language. Not only do they not pick on each other like we did, they fight bullies. This is amazing. Like, kids growing up, when I grew up, we picked hard on each other, okay? Kids do still pick on each other a little bit, but they fight bullying unlike we did. And they don't have the disparaging commentary. And guess what else they have? We had the Cosby Show. They have Blackish, right? They talk about real issues today, right? Mm-hmm. There's a whole host of representation across media, across TV, across the movies. So they get to see themselves and others in a constant, wide-ranging basis that my generation didn't, and anybody previously to me did not. That's why I believe our actual focus, while we need to do the good work right now, we need to really hard focus. Just like Barack Obama says, the former president, focus on the younger generations. They have the character for it. They use the inclusive language. They understand what work needs to be done and can be shown by us investing holistically in them and getting them to bridge the differences so they don't have to have this continued cycle of oppression and violence, and they can be the change that we wish we have gotten to but aren't there yet in 2020. Slide, please. That's all I got. There's my contact information. I will tell you, this is a conversation about being professionals, and I'll end it with this quote. I saw this great thing by Gideon Rose. He writes for Foreign Affairs. He talked about professionals. He said, professionals warn and plan, amateurs scoff and complain. And by the time this crisis arrives, it's too late to do more than just react and suffer. So I'm gonna ask everybody on this call, everybody watching, those who might see it later as it's recorded, are you a leader? Because this is a leadership conversation. This is about leading your household. This is about leading your community. This is about leading in your work, whatever your workplace is. This is about leadership, and it's about stepping into uncomfortable conversations, uncomfortable places, and getting a coalition of the willing around you and firing people up to do so as well, and changing things. If that means for you, that means to get out and vote, then go do it. If that means participating in some of the talks, some of the ruckus talks that are going on, whether that be on the street or on Zoom or in a chat room, then you do it. This is about leadership. Be a professional, right? Don't be an amateur. I'll pause right there for you, Otis.
Fire, on fire. We got some questions. From
Bring
Mr.
it.
Ant Will. He said, what's needed more right now? Uniformity or unity?
So that's kind of a loaded question, right? You only give me two options.
Yeah.
I think what's needed right now is leadership, flatly, right? Leadership means sometimes you have to unify. You have to come together. You need to build unity. But that unity isn't just in our community. I don't want to speak for every Black person, but I want to speak from my Brown experience. That means I need to breed and build unity across different types of backgrounds, ethnicities, genders, et cetera, right? But uniformity at times as a leader can matter too, right? Sometimes we need to put on a uniform right and have that stuff right. You know, I'm using some symbology here. You know, if you got strings hanging and you're all crumpled up, right? Somebody's getting distracted from your professionalism because they're paying attention to the fact that your boots aren't laced, right? So we also need uniformity. We still also need connectivity. We still need to obey the law in certain instances, right? Like, I had a cadet ask me one time, there was a gentleman shot in his back in South Carolina when I was at TAC, and a teacher at United States Military Academy a couple years ago. In South Carolina, dude's running away. He got out of a car, broken tail light.
Yep.
And the cop shot him in the back.
We all seen that.
Like,
yep.
we all saw that. He's one of the gentlemen in the last decade. And this white cadet, he asked me, he said, "Hey, how do you feel about that? You're from South Carolina. You ever been stopped for a situation like that?" And I said, yeah, I've been stopped for certain situations. But I also try to make sure my car doesn't have broken taillights. That's not an indictment on that individual or that situation. And I also understand the situation being from South Carolina. I know how sometimes those cops can be and just be looking. But again, I try my best to obey the law. I try my best to do everything to put me in a place where I might not be in a compromising situation. And we've seen, time and time again, that even when you can be doing the right thing. There's a woman who was recently shot in the last couple of years who had her own pistol registered, heard some noise in her backyard, went to the window trying to see what was going on, shot by a cop, never identified themselves, right? Wasn't in uniform, killed that lady, and she was on her own residence. She thought somebody was trying to break in. So she was doing the right thing legally, and it still didn't work out.
Yeah. I
think we're in a better place. Again, I believe in the Constitution. I believe in this country. That's why I still serve it. That's why I've read common sense. That's why I've read the Constitution. That's why I've read the Federalist Papers. That's why I understand the framers' mindset. I try to, at least. I believe in what we stand for, and I try to live up to that. So that requires some uniformity to those principles. And if something like my daughter said when we had the conversation, hey, I'm scared for you, and she had some tears last weekend. If something like that was to happen to me, it would be super unfortunate. But at the end of the day, I know I had done everything right up to that point. And if it happens that wasn't by my hand because I was trying to do the right thing, I think my spirit could at least rest easy along the way. I hope that answers the question. I know it's tough.
I think it did.
Okay.
So I don't see any more questions coming in, but I guess we can pull back from the questions and comments. And I just personally want to say thank you. Just thank you for, for reaching out to me, for the opportunity for us to just have this great conversation. I'm hoping that we could have more of these sessions. Just, you're kind of like the embodiment of the official program of what I want to do. So if I can assist you, let me know. And if you can assist me, I'll let you know as well. So I just want to say, thank you, man. Just really, really thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Otis. There's times in this conversation I'm obviously a little bit fired up. There's times in this conversation I'm taking kind of a radical point of view or a not typical and atypical point of view. And I think leaders do that, right? We push conversations. We bring up stuff that people don't want to talk about. We get in that uneasiness, right? But we got to hold that place, right? Like my mentor told me, Chevy, you don't want to be comfortable. So I appreciate the opportunity to share a couple of thoughts, right? I appreciate the opportunity to share some resources and some approaches. And I would appreciate anybody that wants to reach out and continue these conversations, be it through my Military Mentors Network, be it through finding me on Facebook. I'm the only Chaveso cook on the planet. That's me. If you Google that person, that's me. And Otis, truly, we've connected over the last couple of weeks to spur on this conversation. I'm here for you, man, whatever you need. And those that know me, as you will continue to get to know me, know that when I say that, it's the truth. So thank you.
Well, I will keep you to that promise. Just a heads up. We have upcoming interviews, and I've got Major General retired Petard on Thursday. He is coming. Right. He's coming to bring that heat of a conversation. So if you want to come in and join in on the conversation, bring it, right?
Definitely will. I had to get that little.
Hey, get that sip in. Get that sip in. Get that
I'm
sip
trying to
in.
get that sip in. Oh yeah, I'm down. I've enjoyed all these conversations, the ones that I've seen with people that I know and people that I don't, because this stuff is all stretching. To me, it's just like when I curl up and read a book, when I can watch somebody else share some perspectives, whether they be controversial or more kind of along the lines. I appreciate it all, because again, this is about these ideas can't just stick right here or even right here, right? They got to be out here between us in that intersubjective space, right, that we've created.
Yeah. If anything, I want to encourage those who enjoyed our conversation today to have those discussions, develop relationships with necessarily people who don't look like you, and have those conversations to start learning from one another. Black lives do matter. My brown skin does matter. His brown skin does matter. My kid's brown skin does matter. And I am thankful for all of what has been occurring now in the past couple weeks now in our country. So I'm thankful for that, and I'm thankful for you joining us today, man.
Thank you. I'll see y'all around on the next time.
All right. Hang out in the broadcast room. We got to talk for a little bit.
We'll do.
All right. And so, wow, just a phenomenal conversation today with Mr. Cook. It was our longest vlog that I've had up to now, and it was definitely well worth it. It was great conversation, great opportunity, just talking about the different topics that he had. The entire video, the slide, the presentation is going to be, of course, on my YouTube page. If you want to check it out, it is leadtv.cc, leadtv.cc. I will send out a link. Of course, we've got our Facebook page. We've got our, what else we got? We got Facebook, we got YouTube. If you need to reach out to me to find out more information about what's coming up, just let me know and I'll reach back to you. And as I always say in parting, take care of yourself, take care of your family, and take care of others. Bye now.